You needed to hear this tonight. Before the world goes quiet and the noise of the day fades into the distance, before your thoughts begin drifting into that strange space between wakefulness and sleep, there is something I want to ask you, and I want you to answer honestly. Have you felt it lately? That subtle but persistent feeling that your life is standing on the edge of something profound, yet nothing seems to move. As if you're standing in front of a door you can almost open, but it refuses to budge. There's a tension in your chest that appears when the lights dim and the room becomes silent. A quiet knowing that whispers you were meant for something far greater than the routine your days have slowly become. You've tried, haven't you? You've worked on your mindset, changed your habits, watched countless videos, saved inspiring quotes, repeated affirmations in the mirror, promising yourself that things would finally shift. But then night arrives, and when you're alone with your thoughts, that same question quietly returns. What am I missing? Why does the breakthrough feel so close enough to taste, yet somehow always just out of reach? If those words echo something inside you, stay with me for a moment. And by the way, welcome to the Inner Code, a place where we explore the hidden patterns shaping our lives. Because what I'm about to share may change how you see this moment entirely. The truth is, you are not broken. You have not fallen behind. And you are not missing some secret ingredient that everyone else somehow discovered without you. What you're feeling right now is not the sting of failure. It's something far more powerful. It's the pressure of expansion. Expansion only happens when something inside you is preparing to emerge, something larger than the version of you that existed yesterday. And tonight, before sleep quietly carries you into another day, there's a reason these words are reaching you. Because sometimes the moment when everything feels most uncertain is the exact moment when everything is about to change. Let me tell you something that most people misunderstand about this moment in their life. You have not become trapped. It may feel that way, but what you are experiencing right now is something entirely different. You have entered a pause. And the difference between being trapped and being in a pause is everything. When someone is trapped, there is no movement possible. But a pause is something else entirely. A pause is the space that appears when something old is ending and something new is preparing to emerge. And yet most people misread this moment. They assume that if progress has slowed, if clarity has faded, if motivation rises and falls like a tide, then they must be doing something wrong. So they respond the only way they know how. They push harder. They add more discipline. They search for more techniques, more routines, more productivity systems. But authentic transformation rarely works this way. Real change does not usually arrive through force. It arrives when something deep within you finally releases its grip on an identity that no longer fits. And that release is rarely comfortable. Because what you are feeling right now is not weakness. It is exhaustion. But not the kind of exhaustion that comes from failure. It is the exhaustion that comes from carrying a version of yourself that you have already outgrown. Old beliefs about what you deserve. Old stories about how life works. Old limits that once protected you, but now quietly confine you. Somewhere along the way you evolved beyond those containers, yet part of you kept holding on to them. And the weight of those outdated patterns is what creates the heaviness you sometimes feel. It is why your drive fluctuates. Why some days you feel powerful and clear, and other days you feel strangely stuck again. It is why manifestation can feel inconsistent, almost like the universe is responding one moment and silent the next. But the truth is simpler than it appears. You are trying to build a new life using blueprints that belong to the old one. Imagine trying to construct a modern home using architectural plans from a building designed a century ago. No matter how hard you work, something will always feel misaligned. And this brings us to something many teachers rarely explain clearly. Your subconscious mind does not respond to how hard you try. It responds to what feels safe. It responds to what feels familiar. It responds to patterns that have been repeated long enough to become the emotional definition of home. Even if that home once included struggle, delay, or uncertainty. Your mind is not trying to sabotage you. It is trying to protect you. If difficulty has been the environment your nervous system learned to navigate, then familiarity with difficulty becomes a form of safety. If waiting has been your baseline experience, then the state of almost but not quite becomes the pattern your mind recreates again and again, not as punishment, but as protection. And this is why manufactured positivity rarely lasts. This is why bursts of motivation often fade after a few weeks. This is why you can desire something deeply, sincerely, with every part of your conscious mind, and still feel blocked from receiving it. Because the real obstacle is not outside of you. It is an outdated program still running quietly beneath the surface of your awareness. Your life unfolds according to what your nervous system expects, not simply what your conscious mind wants. These expectations quietly shape everything. What opportunities you notice, what possibilities you overlook, what risks feel acceptable, and what dreams feel unrealistic. Right now, your entire system may still be calibrated to an earlier version of you. The version that needed to stay cautious. The version that learned to be careful with hope. The version that believed reaching too high could lead to disappointment. But that version of you is not who you are becoming anymore. And the tension you feel is the signal of that misalignment. The restlessness, the quiet impatience, that subtle voice that keeps whispering that there must be more than this. And the truth is, that voice is correct. Because the reason you are hearing these words tonight is not random. Sleep is not just rest. It is a gateway. When the body begins to relax and the mind slowly releases its constant analysis of the day, something remarkable happens. Your defenses soften. The analytical mind grows quieter. And beneath that surface layer, your deeper consciousness becomes more receptive than at almost any other moment of the day. In this state, you do not need to battle yourself. You do not need to force belief. You do not need to fix anything tonight. All you need to do is allow a new instruction to be planted when your system is most open to receiving it. And before we go any further, I want you to do something simple. Take one slow breath. Not a forced breath, just a natural one. Let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw relax. Let your body understand, even for a moment, that vigilance is not required right now. Because here is something essential that almost no one explains about manifestation. Manifestation is not about pulling things toward you through tension or effort. It is about dissolving the resistance that has quietly been pushing them away. The less tension your system carries, the more naturally life begins to flow again. The more your nervous system relaxes into trust, the more reality seems to meet you halfway. And this is why so many breakthroughs appear to arrive in moments when people stop striving. Not because effort is wrong, but because surrender carries its own intelligence. You were never meant to live in constant tension. You were never meant to chase alignment as if it were something outside of you. Alignment appears when you stop fighting yourself. And right now your only task is simple. Allow a new baseline to begin forming inside you. A baseline where life can work with you instead of against you. A baseline where support appears when it is needed. A baseline where progress feels natural rather than forced. Because the mind that once learned to scan constantly for danger can also learn something new. It can learn to scan for opportunity, for synchronicity, for evidence that life is not working against you, but quietly organizing itself in ways you may not have noticed yet. And this quiet retraining of your awareness often begins in the final moments before sleep. There is something important happening in your mind right now, something subtle that most people never notice. The retraining of your awareness begins with what you allow to settle into your consciousness before sleep. And yet, here is the part almost no one explains. When you spend years, sometimes decades, conditioning your nervous system to expect difficulty, your brain literally builds pathways for that expectation. These pathways become like well-worn roads in your mind. Every time you travel them, they deepen. They become smoother, faster, more automatic. Eventually, your mind follows them without effort. Your nervous system does not stop to question whether those roads lead somewhere beneficial. It only recognizes that they are familiar, and familiarity feels safe. That is why you can consciously desire a completely different life while unconsciously recreating the same emotional patterns again and again. Your conscious mind is trying to steer toward a new destination, but your subconscious keeps returning to the route it has memorized. This is not sabotage. It is simply how the human brain works. The brain values efficiency and survival more than happiness or expansion. So when I speak about introducing a new instruction into your system, I am not talking about repeating words on the surface of your awareness. I am talking about reaching the deeper layer of your internal operating system, the place where your baseline expectations about life are stored. And the most powerful moment to access that layer happens in the quiet threshold between waking and sleeping. Think about what occurs in your mind just before sleep. The logical voice softens. The inner critic fades. The protective tension you carried throughout the day begins to loosen. In that moment, your brain naturally shifts into the same theta brainwave patterns often associated with deep meditation. In this state, your subconscious becomes far more receptive. This is not mystical language. It is neuroscience. When the brain enters theta, the barrier between conscious intention and subconscious programming becomes thinner. This is the same reason children learn so rapidly in their early years. They spend much of their time in this brainwave state. It is also why hypnotherapy can work so effectively. And it is why what you absorb before sleep can shape your internal world so profoundly. Your system is essentially downloading new instructions, new possibilities, new expectations. Tonight, something is being planted within you, not through effort, but through permission. When you lie down later, I want you to gently repeat one simple truth to yourself. Do not analyze it. Do not debate it. Simply allow it to move through your awareness. I am allowed to experience ease now. Let that statement settle into you. I am allowed to experience ease now. You do not need a complicated system. You do not need a strict routine. You do not even need proof yet. Your nervous system simply needs to hear that ease is no longer dangerous. Because here is another layer most people overlook. For many individuals, ease actually feels threatening. Somewhere along the path of your life, you may have learned that when things feel too easy, something must be wrong. You may have learned that rest must be earned, that peace must be justified, that good outcomes must be paid for through struggle. Many people were taught, directly or indirectly, that suffering equals value and ease equals laziness or illusion. When a belief like that becomes deeply embedded, something strange begins to happen. When life finally starts to flow, when opportunities begin to appear without force, when things start aligning naturally, the nervous system becomes uncomfortable. It interprets ease as a warning sign. It searches for problems to solve because problems feel normal. It generates drama because drama feels familiar. But what if ease is not a warning signal at all? What if ease is actually the frequency of alignment? What if the struggle you were taught to glorify is simply resistance to your natural state? Look at nature for a moment. Does a tree struggle to grow? Does it force its leaves to perform photosynthesis? Does it repeat affirmations in order to produce fruit? Of course not. A tree simply receives what it needs: sunlight, water, nutrients, and its internal intelligence does the rest. Growth happens because the conditions are supportive and the tree is not resisting its own design. You operate under the same principle. There is an intelligence within you, a blueprint guiding your expansion, a natural movement toward the fullest expression of who you are. But unlike the tree, you have been conditioned to doubt this intelligence, to override it, to believe that nothing meaningful happens without pressure or force. Tonight, when you introduce this new instruction into your awareness, you are not adding something foreign to your system. You are removing interference that has been blocking what was always meant to flow. If emotion surfaces, welcome it. If resistance appears, observe it gently without criticism. That is simply the old operating system recognizing that change is occurring. You are safe. You are supported. You are not behind in life. This is only the beginning. And there is something else you should understand. The pressure you feel right now, the restlessness, the sense that something is about to shift, is not evidence that you are stuck. It is evidence that you are standing right at the edge of transformation. In quantum physics, there is a phenomenon called quantum tunneling. It describes how particles can pass through barriers that, according to classical physics, should be impossible to penetrate. The particle does not accumulate enough energy to break the barrier apart. Instead, it simply exists on one side, and then suddenly appears on the other side. It tunnels through. Human consciousness behaves in a surprisingly similar way. You do not need endless knowledge, endless techniques, or endless proof. What you need is the willingness to allow the possibility that you already exist on the other side of the barrier you have been facing. The moment your system begins to accept that possibility is real, the shift can happen almost instantly. This is what people refer to when they describe sudden breakthroughs after long periods of stagnation. The breakthrough may look sudden from the outside, but internally the groundwork has been forming the entire time. And when identity finally shifts, when the baseline expectation changes, it happens in a moment. One moment you are someone for whom life feels difficult. The next moment you are someone for whom life begins to flow. Nothing external necessarily changed in that instant. Yet internally, everything reorganized. And that is why this moment tonight matters. You are in the exact energetic space where this kind of shift becomes possible. You are tired of repeating the old patterns. You are open to something new. You are standing in the space between who you used to be and who you are becoming. And that space is the most fertile ground for transformation that exists. In the next part of this journey, we will explore something even more powerful: the way your attention literally shapes the reality you experience, and how learning to guide that attention gently can allow opportunities, solutions, and alignment to appear naturally in your life. For now, allow your body to relax. Allow your mind to soften. Let these ideas settle quietly beneath the surface of your awareness. Because simply understanding this shift has already begun to loosen something inside you that has been held tight for far longer than you realized. And sometimes that quiet shift alone changes more than the mind can yet comprehend. And that single shift alone has already begun changing more inside you than your mind can fully recognize. Now I want to introduce you to something even more powerful: your attention. Because attention is the invisible architect of your entire experience. It quietly determines what grows and what fades, what feels possible and what feels forever out of reach. Most people move through life unaware that their attention is constantly being directed, not by conscious choice, but by old patterns, past conditioning, and emotional habits that once served as protection. Over time, these patterns become automatic. You wake up in the morning, and before you even realize it, your mind begins its familiar scan of reality, searching for problems, measuring what is missing, replaying unfinished concerns, noticing everything that has not yet happened. And it happens so quickly that you barely notice it. But every time your attention locks onto what is absent, it sends a quiet signal into your inner world. This matters. This is real. This is what we must continue creating. Not because life is cruel or unfair, but because consciousness always follows focus. This is why manifestation can feel inconsistent. You may be speaking the right affirmations, imagining the right outcomes, repeating the right ideas, but your attention is still anchored to the old narrative. And consciousness responds far more strongly to what you observe than to what you simply say. Imagine your attention as a beam of light moving through a dark room. Wherever that beam settles, energy gathers there. Emotion gathers there. Momentum begins to build. If the beam keeps illuminating waiting, you experience more waiting. If it keeps illuminating struggle, you experience more struggle. If it keeps illuminating the feeling of almost, but not quite, you remain suspended in almost. But here is the realization that changes everything. You do not need to control every thought that enters your mind. Thoughts come and go naturally. What truly matters is attention. Attention is a choice, subtle, quiet, and available to you in every moment. And the moment you begin guiding your attention differently, even gently, even imperfectly, you begin shifting the direction of your entire experience. Now here is where this becomes even more fascinating. Guiding your attention is not just a mental exercise. It is a physiological shift that changes how your entire system interacts with reality. Scientists have long observed something known as the observer effect in quantum mechanics. At the subatomic level, particles behave differently when they are being observed than when they are not. The simple act of observation alters the outcome. Possibilities collapse into specific events. In a surprisingly similar way, your consciousness functions as an observer of your life. Every moment, countless potential realities exist around you, all equally possible, all waiting to be experienced. Yet your attention quietly selects which of those possibilities begins to solidify into the reality you live. When your focus repeatedly settles on lack, delay, or disappointment, your system becomes skilled at recognizing more of the same patterns. Not because the world is conspiring against you, but because your perception is tuned like a radio receiver to a specific frequency. Think of it this way. Radio waves for every station already exist in the air around you. You do not create them when you tune the dial. You simply choose which frequency you amplify. Your attention operates the same way. It determines which version of reality becomes louder in your experience. For many people, attention has been conditioned since childhood to search for what could go wrong. Perhaps there was chaos in your early environment. Perhaps unpredictability forced your mind to stay alert. Over time, your nervous system learned to scan constantly for potential problems. That strategy may have protected you once, but now it quietly limits what you allow yourself to see. The good news is that attention can be retrained. Not through force, not through pretending everything is perfect, but through gentle redirection. When you notice your mind asking, "Why is this taking so long?" you can soften the question into something more open, something like, "Movement is happening, even if I cannot see it yet." That subtle shift communicates something important to your body. It signals safety. And when the body senses safety, your nervous system begins moving out of survival mode. Physiologically, this transition is profound. When the brain perceives threat or lack, it activates the sympathetic nervous system. Your amygdala signals danger. Cortisol floods the bloodstream. Heart rate rises, breathing becomes shallow, and blood flow shifts away from creative areas of the brain toward muscles prepared for fight or flight. In this state, your mind becomes narrow, reactive, and focused only on what is already known. New possibilities cannot easily appear because your system is busy protecting you. But when your attention relaxes toward openness, something remarkable happens. Your body begins activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the state associated with restoration, creativity, and connection. The vagus nerve signals safety through your entire system. Cortisol levels decrease. Heart rate variability increases, which scientists associate with resilience and adaptability. Blood flow returns to the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for imagination, problem-solving, and long-term thinking. In this state, your mind becomes capable of perceiving opportunities that were previously invisible. Ideas arrive more easily. Solutions appear in unexpected ways. Encounters begin to align naturally. You may have experienced moments like this before, times when everything seemed to fall into place without effort. Conversations unfolded perfectly. Opportunities appeared at the right time. Life felt as though it was moving with you instead of against you. This state is often described as being in the flow, but there is a scientific explanation behind it. Researchers studying heart-brain coherence have discovered that when the nervous system enters a balanced state of calm alertness, the electromagnetic field produced by the human heart becomes more organized and measurable several feet beyond the body. In this coherent state, your internal systems, brain, heart, and nervous system, begin synchronizing. And when your internal systems synchronize, your interactions with the external world begin shifting as well. You become more receptive, more intuitive, more aware of subtle opportunities that previously passed unnoticed. This is why solutions often appear the moment you stop obsessing over a problem. Messages arrive when you finally stop checking your phone. Opportunities appear when you release the need to control every step of the outcome. It is not coincidence. It is coherence. When your system relaxes into safety, your perception widens. And when perception widens, reality appears to expand with it. But coherence cannot exist in a system dominated by chronic tension, worry, or constant vigilance. The nervous system must first feel safe enough to shift from protection mode into connection mode. And this is exactly why the small practices we have been discussing, guiding your attention, softening your focus, allowing moments of calm, are far more powerful than they appear. They are not just emotional exercises. They are signals that retrain your biology, signals that teach your system it is finally safe to open the door to new possibilities. And this is exactly where a simple practice becomes powerful. Tonight, I want you to try something gentle. Not perfectly, not constantly, just with quiet awareness. When you notice your attention drifting toward worry or tension, do not fight it and do not judge it. Simply guide it back, the same way you would gently guide a child back toward calm. Bring your focus to something steady and real, your breathing, the feeling of the chair or bed supporting your body, or the simple awareness that you are here, still present, still breathing. This small shift begins training your nervous system to remain in the present moment, because clarity only exists here, not in imagined futures or replayed pasts. Now let me share a simple technique that brings everything we have discussed together. Before you fall asleep tonight, place one hand on your chest and the other on your stomach. Allow your breathing to move naturally. Do not try to control the rhythm. Just observe the gentle rise and fall of your body. As you breathe, Bring your attention to the center of your chest. Imagine that each breath is moving through your heart, flowing in and out of that space with quiet ease. And as you do this, repeat a simple phrase silently to yourself. I am supported even in stillness. Do not force yourself to feel anything special. Do not try to manufacture emotion. Simply allow the words to exist in your awareness while your body listens. You may notice warmth spreading in your chest. You may feel a subtle release of tension in your shoulders or jaw, or you may feel nothing at all. Every response is valid. What matters is not the sensation. It is the signal you are sending to your nervous system. With this practice, you are creating a new neural pathway, a new association between stillness and safety. You are teaching your body that support does not require constant effort, control, or motion. That life can hold you even when you are resting. For many people, this realization alone is revolutionary. Because somewhere along the way, your system may have learned that rest meant vulnerability and stillness meant falling behind. Tonight, you begin replacing that belief with something quieter and far more powerful, the understanding that support can exist even in stillness. Now let us explore another layer that quietly shapes your reality more than most. People realize your expectations. Not hope, but expectation. Hope looks toward the future with uncertainty, while expectation carries an assumption about what will happen next. Many people move through life unconsciously expecting disappointment. They brace themselves for things to go wrong. They prepare emotionally for delays, setbacks, or obstacles before those things even appear. And that preparation creates tension inside the nervous system, a subtle contraction that influences how reality is interpreted. Expectations are not passive thoughts. They are instructions being sent continuously to your subconscious mind about what patterns to recognize and reinforce. When you expect difficulty, your perception begins scanning your environment for evidence of difficulty. And because your attention is tuned to that frequency, you inevitably find it. Not because life contains more struggle than ease, but because you are amplifying one channel of experience while ignoring others. Imagine adjusting the dial on an old radio. Every station is already broadcasting through the air around you. The signals exist whether you tune into them or not. But the moment you choose a frequency, that signal becomes clear while all the others fade into background noise. Your expectations function the same way. They determine which version of reality becomes most visible to you. When your nervous system expects problems, it detects problems. When it expects waiting, it notices delays. But when it begins expecting small improvements, subtle support, or gradual movement forward, your awareness begins recognizing those patterns as well. This is why shifting expectation can transform your internal state so quickly. You do not need to expect miracles or dramatic changes overnight. Something much simpler is enough. Begin expecting that things will work out slightly more often than they fail. Begin expecting small victories, neutral outcomes, incremental progress. As these expectations soften your nervous system, your body relaxes, and a relaxed system becomes receptive to new possibilities. There is a simple practice that can help your subconscious adopt this new baseline. Each evening before you fall asleep this week, take a moment to recall 3 things that went better than you expected that day. They do not need to be dramatic. In fact, the smaller they are, the more powerful this exercise becomes. Perhaps the traffic was lighter than usual. Perhaps someone smiled at you unexpectedly. Perhaps you found something you thought had been lost. These tiny moments may seem insignificant, but they contain something important. They represent positive deviations from the expectations your mind normally carries. Each time you acknowledge one of these moments, you create a small crack in the old program that assumed life would be difficult. And each time that crack widens, space opens for a new baseline of expectation to form. Gradually, your subconscious begins learning something new. Positive outcomes are possible. Support exists. Ease can appear unexpectedly. Over time, your system begins anticipating these positive deviations as part of normal experience rather than rare exceptions. And when expectation shifts, perception shifts. Your consciousness becomes more receptive to opportunities, solutions, and synchronistic moments that were previously invisible. This is why the moments before sleep are so powerful. As your mind becomes quieter, as the analytical voice fades and the defenses of the day dissolve, your subconscious becomes unusually receptive. What you allow your attention to rest upon during this window often becomes the instruction your system carries into the next day. So tonight, before sleep arrives, allow your attention to settle gently on a simple truth. I am supported even in stillness. Let that thought be the final signal your nervous system receives before rest. You might feel a subtle calm move through your body, or you might notice nothing at all. Both responses are completely normal. Transformation rarely announces itself with dramatic signals. Often it begins quietly, beneath the surface of awareness, as your mind slowly learns that uncertainty is not something to fear. Because uncertainty is not the enemy of manifestation, certainty is. When you believe you already know exactly how life must unfold, you close the door to possibilities beyond your imagination. But when you allow yourself to rest comfortably in the unknown, when you can hold uncertainty without collapsing into anxiety, you open yourself to outcomes far greater than anything your limited perspective could design. In that space, life has room to surprise you. Solutions appear that you never could have planned. Paths reveal themselves that logic alone could never predict. And this quiet trust, this willingness to remain open within uncertainty, is what many traditions have always described as faith. Not blind belief, not ignoring reality, but trusting that life is guided by an intelligence larger than your immediate understanding. Trusting that even when you cannot see the next step, the path ahead is still unfolding. And tonight, as your mind begins drifting toward sleep, you are allowing that unfolding to begin in ways you may not yet perceive. Before we move deeper, I want you to pause for a moment. Look around the room you are sitting in right now. Notice something strange. For the past few minutes, your attention has been so absorbed in these words, in these ideas, that the physical space around you almost disappeared from your awareness. The walls, the furniture, the quiet atmosphere of the room, all of it faded into the background while your focus followed this transmission. That is the real power of attention. Attention has the ability to reshape your experience of reality in real time. It can make time feel like it has slowed down or sped up. It can make worries fade temporarily. It can make the world feel distant while your inner world becomes vivid and alive. Your problems did not disappear during that moment. They still exist somewhere in your life. But for a brief period, they stopped occupying the center of your consciousness. And when something leaves the center of your awareness, it also loses its emotional weight. This is why attention is often called the invisible architect of experience. Wherever your attention rests, energy gathers there, meaning grows there. Reality begins organizing itself around that focal point. So right now I want you to take a small action. If you are watching this video on YouTube, pause for a second and type a simple phrase in the comments. I am allowing ease to find me. This may seem like a small gesture, but it carries a deeper purpose. When you write those words, you are not just leaving a comment beneath a video. You are interrupting an old mental pattern and consciously introducing a new instruction to your mind. Speaking or writing something into form creates a different resonance than simply thinking it silently. It signals commitment. It transforms a passing thought into a declaration. And declarations have a way of reshaping internal momentum. Now let us move into something even more important, identity. Not the roles you perform, not your job, not your history, not even the personality traits people associate with you. Identity, in the deeper sense, is the quiet character you believe yourself to be inside the story of your life. At every moment you are operating from an identity. Even when you feel like you are doing nothing, even when you are resting or waiting for change to arrive, there is still a version of you that feels familiar. A version of you your mind recognizes as this is who I am. Your consciousness works constantly to maintain the consistency of that version. But here is something most people are never taught. Your identity is not who you truly are. It is simply who you have agreed to be based on the evidence of your past experiences. Every moment you have lived through has quietly contributed information to this identity. Every success, every disappointment, every compliment you received, every criticism that lingered in your mind longer than it should have. Your subconscious has been collecting all of that data and slowly constructing a profile of who it believes you are. And once that profile becomes solid enough, it begins filtering every new experience through that identity. Your subconscious essentially asks one question: does this match who we believe we are? If the answer is yes, the experience is accepted easily. If the answer is no, something interesting happens. The opportunity may be ignored. The compliment may be dismissed. The possibility may feel uncomfortable or unrealistic. This is why people sometimes sabotage themselves right when life begins opening up, because the breakthrough would require them to become someone unfamiliar. And the subconscious mind, whose primary goal is stability and survival, often prefers familiar discomfort over unfamiliar expansion. Think about how this pattern appears in daily life. Someone compliments your work, and instead of accepting it, you laugh it off or quickly change the subject. Why? Because accepting that praise might conflict with an identity that quietly believes you are not worthy of recognition. Or perhaps an opportunity appears in front of you, something that could truly change your life, yet you hesitate, delay, or create excuses. Not because you lack ability, but because stepping into that opportunity would require embodying a version of yourself your subconscious does not yet recognize as real. In many ways, your identity is quietly directing the script of your life. And most of the time, you are not even aware it is happening. This is why change can feel uncomfortable even when the change is positive. Growth asks you to release an older version of yourself, and the mind can interpret that release as a form of loss. But the truth is something very different. You are not losing yourself. You are upgrading yourself. Identity is not fixed. It is reinforced through repetition and through the experiences you allow yourself to fully receive. The real shift begins the moment you allow yourself to update the identity you have been carrying. For many people, this realization can feel confronting because identity feels permanent. It feels like something solid, something fixed. But in reality, identity is simply a pattern reinforced over time. And the thing that reinforces it most is not words, but the experiences you allow yourself to truly receive. When you constantly minimize your victories, those moments never integrate into your self-image. When support appears and you brush it off as coincidence, your system never registers that support is real. When something positive unfolds and you immediately question it, doubt it, or expect it to disappear, your subconscious quietly removes that moment from the story it tells about who you are. Over time, this creates a strange imbalance. You begin cataloging every disappointment with perfect clarity, yet the moments that contradict that narrative fade quickly from memory. This is why it can feel as though life rarely works out for you, even when evidence exists that it does. Let me share something important that many people resist hearing at first. You are not only attached to your identity, you are psychologically dependent on it. Not because it always serves you, not because it makes you happy, but because it is familiar. Your nervous system has learned to associate that identity with survival. So whenever something appears that challenges that identity, even if it is something beneficial, your system may trigger a subtle alarm. It whispers that something feels wrong. It encourages you to retreat back toward what is known. This is why affirmations alone rarely produce lasting transformation. You can repeat positive phrases thousands of times, but if the deeper identity beneath those words still expects struggle, the subconscious will continue recreating that familiar pattern. Not to punish you, but to maintain internal consistency. Real change begins when the identity itself begins to shift. And identity shifts through two forces working together: new information and new evidence. Tonight, I want you to experiment with a different perspective. Instead of waiting for undeniable proof before believing life can work in your favor, consider allowing yourself to embody that possibility now in small ways. Give yourself permission to be someone for whom things begin working out. Not someday far in the future, not after one final obstacle, but quietly in this moment. This does not require pretending or forcing optimism. It simply requires responding differently when something supportive appears. When life offers you a moment of alignment, even something small, allow it to matter. Let it register. Instead of dismissing it as luck or coincidence, pause and acknowledge it. Say quietly to yourself, this counts. This matters. Because identity transforms through permission. Your subconscious does not require dramatic evidence to begin updating its internal model of who you are. It only requires moments that are noticed, accepted, and allowed to integrate. Each time you recognize support, each time you accept a small win, each time you allow yourself to believe that something positive can remain in your life, you strengthen a new identity. And gradually, Without force, that identity becomes the lens through which you experience reality. Now, if what you have heard tonight has been resonating somewhere deeper than simple understanding, if it feels like these words have been touching a quiet place inside you that has been waiting for permission, then I want you to recognize something important. Moments like this are not random. When an idea arrives at the exact moment you are ready to hear it, when a message appears precisely when your mind has grown tired of the old patterns, that is often the beginning of transformation. So if something inside you feels slightly lighter right now, slightly more open, then allow that feeling to exist without analyzing it. Let it settle. Because authentic change rarely begins with dramatic breakthroughs or sudden revelations. More often it begins with subtle internal shifts, small adjustments in how you see yourself and what you believe is possible. And these small shifts, when repeated over time, gradually reorganize your entire reality. The lesson hidden inside everything we have explored tonight is surprisingly simple, yet incredibly powerful. Your life does not change the moment external circumstances transform. Your life changes the moment the internal story you believe about yourself begins to evolve. When your expectations shift, your perception shifts. When perception shifts, your choices shift. And when your choices shift, the direction of your life begins to quietly reorganize. This is why transformation rarely feels dramatic at first. Instead, it feels subtle, almost ordinary. You start making slightly different decisions. You notice opportunities you once overlooked. You walk away from situations that no longer resonate with who you are becoming. Your tolerance for chaos decreases. Your willingness to receive support increases. And over time, these small adjustments compound until your life begins to look completely different from the one you once believed was permanent. None of this requires force. None of this requires you to become someone artificial. In fact, the opposite is true. Real growth often feels like remembering rather than becoming. It feels like slowly returning to the version of yourself that existed before doubt, before conditioning, before you were taught to expect limitation. And as your nervous system begins to relax into this new baseline, you will notice something interesting. Decisions that once felt difficult will begin to feel obvious. Environments that once felt normal may start to feel heavy or misaligned. Conversations will change. Opportunities will appear in places you never expected. Not because the world suddenly changed overnight, but because your relationship with it changed. The most important thing to remember is this. The version of you who lies down tonight will not be identical to the version of you who wakes up tomorrow. Every moment your body is renewing itself. Your cells are replacing themselves. Your brain is forming new connections. Your consciousness is integrating new information. You are not a fixed identity. You are a living process that is constantly evolving. So allow tonight to become the moment you consciously choose which version of yourself you are ready to step into next. Allow this to be the moment where you gently release the old identity that required struggle in order to feel real. The old version needed constant proof before it could believe in possibility. The new version begins with belief and allows life to respond. The old version waited for permission from circumstances. The new version understands that permission has always come from within. And tonight you give yourself that permission. Now, before you drift into sleep, there is one more thing I would like to invite you to do. If this message has brought clarity, comfort, or even a small shift in perspective, consider subscribing to the channel and joining this growing community. Every video here is created with the intention of helping you explore the deeper connection between consciousness and reality. Your support helps this space continue to grow, and it allows these ideas to reach the people who may need them the most. So if you feel called, subscribe, stay connected, and continue this journey with us. Because the more people who begin to understand their own power as conscious creators, the more the world itself begins to reflect that awareness. Tonight you rest. Tonight you release. Tonight you allow a new version of yourself to quietly begin emerging. And when you wake tomorrow, even if the change feels small, remember that transformation has already begun.